Hello everybody, Sparkster1701 here, and to conclude the month that we've been looking at the Decepticon Commandos, we're going to take a look at their combined form, Ruination. Of course, Ruination was released back in 2001, and this of course is the individually released versions of Ruination. There were, in that same time frame, 2 Walmart exclusive box sets that had him in different colors, and I will show you those here in a moment. But for right now, we'll take a look at the more recognizable version of Ruination. And as you can see, he is basically He's a repaint of Bruticus, for those of you who've come in late to this month's special. But he does have a few things different, as namely he is now holding 2 guns. Many of the weapon accessories were made so that they could be combined together to form super guns. Of course, if we wanted to, we could remove one of the guns and replace it with the ramp that he's got stored on his backside and use it as a shield. Let's demonstrate that. Just remove that there. We'll take away this gun. We'll pop it apart, it looks like. And then just insert the ramp. There we go. And now Ruination has a shield instead of a second gun. So that does increase his play value a little bit better over Bruticus. Since the original toy, it didn't have a post on the back of the ramp. As you'll see if you take a look at last week's review of Mega Octane, I show the comparison between the ramps between Mega Octane and Onslaught. You can see that the new one has been designed better to include that additional post. Now, of course, there is also one other noticeable change, and that's mainly in the form of how the tank figure is attached here. Armor hide is attached where the turret is facing towards the back, whereas on the original Bruticus, Brawl was always placed in a position where the tank turret became the kneecap. And of course, why this was changed between the 2 toys is hard to say, but it is a noticeable difference between the 2. Aside, of course, from their paint jobs. And of course, that Bruticus has some stickers on him, whereas Ruination does not feature any stickers. Get Bruticus here out of the way. And of course, like with most combiners, the articulation is limited to the arms, in the sense that he can rotate the arm all the way at the shoulder. And of course, if he's standing too close to the backdrop, he will drop the shield. So we'll put the gun bag in. Now, of course, the instructions for Ruination here also show of a different configuration due to the fact that the lore did explain that he had a different configuration and what it meant. When he's built like this, as you're seeing here in front of you, with both Rotor and Movor as the arms, Ruination does have the ability to fly. But if you switch everybody around, put these guys down here and these 2 up here at the arms, Apparently, Ruination is more grounded, and thus has more access to the weaponry and firepower. Mainly due to the fact that he will now have access to Armorhide's turret. Let's reconfigure them real quick, and we'll show you this other mode. And here we are in the more grounded version of Ruination. I took a little liberties with it due to the relative newness of the toys that I have, as supposedly Rotor's legs are supposed to be all scrunched up together. But unfortunately, due to the relative newness of that toy, it's not cooperating with me. So we had to go with that configuration. Plus, of course, according to the instructions, they want the hood here of roll bar all the way flat against his back, but I found if you leave it raised up somewhat slightly, you can connect the second gun, since the main cannon on this is roll bar's cannon. So that way it gives Ruination a second arm cannon, in addition to Armorhide's turret here. So, all in all, that does look rather impressive. I mean, granted, it isn't the best, but the addition of the combined guns does increase the play value, and when you put him like this, he definitely looks like he's ready for war, and he even has his shield at the ready to protect himself. So, all in all, it's not a bad choice, really, when you think about it. And of course, at this point would be the normal spot where I would show off all the loose pieces, but since I've covered everybody this month, it shouldn't really take anybody that much difficulty to find everybody's individual reports and see their individual loose components. So, yeah, we're going to be lazy this time. But just this once. We can't afford it all the time. Now, of course, as promised, let's take a look at their multi-packs that were available at Walmart back in the day. This right here is the Universe version of Ruination that features him in the desert camouflage. And the desert camouflage doesn't look too bad, although it kind of doesn't work for me as much, mainly due to Movor. The space shuttle bit it doesn't work in desert camo. To be honest with you folks, it just doesn't work that well. But still, it is a nice, interesting variation to the toy, so I won't dismiss it too easily. And of course, as you can see, this is still in the box. Turn around here to the back side. One thing I don't like about what they show here for Ruination is they have the leg joints on Mega Octane exposed. Now, while I suppose, yes, you could do that to increase his articulation a bit, but I will say from experience with Onslaught and Bruticus from back in the 80s, these joints will wear out from multiple play wear. And that unfortunately means that it will deteriorate, and then he won't stand right, or it takes a little bit of effort to get him to stand. I also notice here that they've got Armorhide facing the front like Brawl did back in the G1 days. Interesting choice as to doing that. Now, I can't tell you if all this is exactly as how it looks, since this is a sealed toy and this was donated, so we will not be tampering with it. Although I will say, I kind of wish they would have carried the camo over onto the robot side of Mega Octane. Since that would have probably made it look a little better. As it is like this, it just looks weird. As you can see, they're rotating the shoulders of Mega Octane there, instead of rotating the robots at their individual joints at the shoulder. So that just makes the whole robot look weird in general. But that's the desert camo version of Ruination. But we also have right here next to it, we have the urban camo version of Ruination. Of course, this is the robots in disguise version, just like the original toy was. Again, this was a Walmart exclusive. This one even still has the price tag on him. And apparently, at the time of his release, he was selling for almost $25. That's not too bad of a price to get the entire team here. As you can see, they're all in various shades of black and gray. This I kind of like. I mean, again, still, Movor kind of ruins it due to being a space shuttle. But this still isn't bad in reality, and it works. You would expect a military-minded Decepticon unit to be in some form of camo. So, even though it looks a little silly with the inclusion of a space shuttle, it still works in its own warped sense. And of course, we'll turn it around to the backside. And again, they've got Armorhide here facing the opposite way that the instructions on the original toy show him. So, obviously, the folks at Hasbro aren't entirely sure as to which way he's supposed to go. Plus, of course, they also famously have an error here on the back of the package, and it's down here, as they've got Rollbar and Armorhide mixed up. Or at least they've got the robots and the alternate modes in the wrong spot. This here's Rollbar, but that's Armorhide's alternate mode. Same thing here. That's Armorhide, but that's Rollbar's alternate mode. So, clearly, somebody in their marketing is not entirely certain as to what in the world they are doing. Of course, this time around, this Ruination comes with a collector card that you could cut and save. Unfortunately, more than likely, since this is on the back of the box, the only thing that'll be on the back side of it is blank cardboard from the inside of the box. So that's kind of lame. I would have liked a nice tech spec to compare Ruination to Bruticus. But again, all in all, it's still not bad, to say the least. Again, this one is still sealed in the box. And again, it is a donation. But then again, the whole toy has been all this month. Ruination was collected by my brother, who operates the YouTube channel Cyclonus150, where he records going-ons at various conventions we attend. So, thank you, Cyclonus, for the donation of Ruination to the channel for this month. I certainly hope that all the viewers out there have enjoyed seeing Ruination. As stated earlier, we really don't have a tech spec or anything to compare between the two giants, so we really don't know how to compare which one of them is better or worse than the other, which is a crying shame, unfortunately. The tech specs was one of the things that made the Transformers better than the GoBots back in the day, due to the fact that Hasbro was basically carrying over the file cards that they introduced for G.I. Joe as something for the Transformers. Interestingly, the folks at Tonka, early in development, were considering doing something similar like that for the GoBots, but somebody up in the upper levels of management decided we didn't need that, and the idea was dropped. And they likely have been kicking themselves for that ever since. But now it seems that Hasbro is dropping it, and that's a crying shame, since basically that was what told us what these guys all did. What was their job in their respective military. And granted, yes, the military has not really been as popular as it was mentioned numerous times throughout the 80s as we came about from the realizations of Vietnam and eventually leading us into the end of the 80s, the early 90s with the invasion in the Persian Gulf. But still, that helped add some character to these figures, and for ones that are more obscure like this, that would be nice to have, especially as in most cases the cartoons that are promoting these toys aren't exactly the best sources of information regarding the character. Since the writers and sometimes the voice actors do take liberties with the character, especially if the toy maker is not providing any sort of real background data on the character. And that, I think, is a crying shame. But anyway, enough of that. Let's get down to my final thoughts. What do I think of Ruination? Ruination is a nice improvement on Bruticus. I will admit that. It is a great improvement over the Generation 1 toy. Is he better than the Generation 1 toy? That's up for debate. I mean, the materials are more or less the same unless you have an earlier edition form of the Combaticons where some of their parts were made of metal. But if you've got one of the later versions of Bruticus, where he's all plastic, this is basically the same thing. Although they've updated some of the technology and improved things a little bit. It is nice to see that you can merge some of the guns together to create a super weapon. That does help add the play value. And of course, as I've said, using the ramp as a shield here, that was a nice touch. Even though you had to wonder why they didn't think of it in the first place. But then again, it could have been just something overlooked back in the day, and somebody decided on it now. It's possible. It's hard to say. We don't really know. The lore behind Ruination sort of states that Mega Octane is the one that's totally in charge, so he's not really taking many opinions or thoughts from his cohorts. Whether that's an improvement on the Combiner or not is kind of up for debate. But then again, there really hasn't been much that has delved into the lore behind a lot of the Combiners, where we can get an idea of how the brains for them really totally work. All we have is speculative theories, and many of that changes depending on what source of the lore we're following. So the cartoons would have depicted it one way or another. The comic books, either by Marvel, Dreamwave, or IDW, have probably all come up with their own different theories regarding how the Combiner brain works. And don't get me started on how Michael Bay did it in Revenge of the Fallen. But all in all, this toy, I think it's pretty good. I do believe it is worthy of the top tier status, because I also like the one extra small detail that they went through, talking about the rearrangement of the robots and giving them a different ability. That was always something that was mentioned in the instructions, that any of the limbs could be rearranged, so we were allowed to build them sort of however we felt like. The Scramble City anime that was seen in Japan, and you can find bits of it on YouTube, does show that the robots could call out scramble and a couple of their limbs would rotate into a different position. However, nothing was really explicitly stated as to what purpose that served. So you were kind of left wondering, well, what's the big deal about it? The only time in the G1 line we ever got anybody that had a purpose for it was Piranhacon, as he came with an extra figure, and that one was stated that he could become a gun. And since each one of the small Seacons became a different gun, that added to the play value. Piranhacon could select which weapon would be most appropriate for the situation he was in. And that just added to the play value a little bit more. Having this, a different means of how he can get around or his weapons loadout, that's a nice touch. And I really wish that Hasbro would have explored that more for these toys, because that would have certainly increased the play value and further broadened the lore behind these popular toys in the first place. This, of course, concludes my review of Ruination and a comparison between him and the G1 Bruticus. I hope everybody enjoyed this special themed month. If you like this review, please drop me a thumbs up here on YouTube. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button down there so you'll join up in our ranks. Also ring the notification bell so you'll be alerted when I post new content. And also share your thoughts about Ruination or Bruticus in the comments down below. This is Sparkster1701 saying I will catch you all later.